My 3-year-old drives me mad when she doesn't listen. For example, she has a younger brother and is constantly spiteful to him, taking things off him, pushing him over, and can really hurt him. She never listens when I explain nicely, so I've shouted at her. Feel like I've lost when this happens. She now has a younger sister, and I want to sort out how I deal with it before she gets older. She seems miserable at the moment, and I feel it's the way I'm handling things. Okay, so one of the things, again, we're going to separate you and your response to them and theirs. And they're both very closely tied when it comes to a toddler, 3-year-old, 2-year-old, 3-year-old, because we can be in conflict with reality of where they're at in their development. So in your mind, when she doesn't listen, there's several things that can be happening. You roll around in your story, and I often say you don't get clean from rolling in the mud. So what we've got to do is work out our muddy mind and change how we're thinking about it. We're rolling around in a story that says, they should be listening to me. Why aren't they listening to me? They never listen to me. Now, you've even said those words. She never was, let me say it, see specifically what you've said. She never listens when I explain nicely. When we use the words, and women are really good at doing this, is we catastrophize things. We say, I always have this happen to me. I never get her to listen to me when I speak nicely. And you make one event or several events the totality of the experience, because your brain will only bring to you evidence of what you have your attention on. So you're saying, you know, she never does it. When you're saying she never does it, you're not looking for the times that she does. You're not looking for what's working at the times when she does. And that in itself clouds your judgments of it. So you've got to be careful of how you're viewing the situation, how you're seeing the situation, and how you're personalizing it. Let me switch over to what's going on for your 3-year-old at the moment, and then I'll come back to you, because both, like I said, they're both very tightly integrated together with this topic. Your 3-year-old has no logic and reasoning skills. Logic and reasoning and rationale is something that happens around school age, around 4 at best, but 5, 6 years old, where they've gained enough information about life to start comparing one thing with another, to start creating deliberate desires and start thinking about decisions and actions. And even then, it's only in its infancy. They're not thinking about future outcome. They're not thinking about the past. Sometimes they remember things and it comes into their present. I'm not saying that they are never using logic and reasoning at this age. I'm saying that it's not deliberate and it's not predictable. So she is very much immersed in the present moment. She is immersed in seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling. For a child under the age of 4, they are so engaged in life and they are learning so much information. And they can understand language really well, and often we mistake understanding language with being able to process the way that we process language. So we have to understand the reality of what's going on for your child in those moments. That fun and pleasure is her priority. Now you have other priorities: get out the door on time, make sure they eat and be bathed and get them to bed so I can have some time to myself, keep them away from their sibling if they're going to hurt them, help them to learn and grow and all of those sorts of things. But your priorities are not their priorities. Their priority is fun and pleasure. And so when they're engaged and engrossed in a task or something that they're doing, and then all of a sudden this person just starts to try and get them to do something else, it can be a bit of a mission for them to get out of that moment and get into the moment that you're wanting them to, especially when it's not fun or it requires some sort of work that they don't really want to do. Now, the reality is that you still need to get them to cooperate. But one of your best leverages is fun, interest, encouragement, praise, working on, it's not just asking nicely, it's looking at what they're doing, where they're at, what's going on for them, what interests them, what makes them feel good, and helping them to want to cooperate with you. Because you don't have the liberty of using rationale or reasoning with them, that'll come later. But at this point in time, it's kind of about plotting and scheming around getting them to cooperate. Now, an example perhaps is, let's say you're out at the shops and you're trying to get your toddler is engaged, they've got a little car and they're trying, they're playing this little game, or they've got a spaceship or something, playing a game, and you're wanting them to concentrate on crossing the road. I would meet them where they are at and engage in the storyline of what they're doing. I would make the trolley the mothership, and we would get that spaceship that they've got into the trolley so that we can get the mothership to, the other mothership to get fuel or something, and make the trolley part of the game so that when you get to the road that you've got to cross, you go, oh, hang on, we've got to stop, or the mothership's going to get run over, and just get your child to transition into what you're wanting them to do by making it an extension of what they're doing, or completely distract them altogether, which is a lot easier to do when their attention is so focused on those 5 senses. You just make it more interesting, you make it more fun, you make it more exciting. So sometimes we've got to get in touch with our own inner child self that is so excited about life and engaged in life and not so focused on outcome. And even though you still have an outcome to reach, you want to focus on how you can help your child to want to reach that outcome with you, rather than get into that, I need to get them to listen to me, I need to get them to obey me, or something like that. So it's about recognizing, getting out of your story of what you think they should be doing, recognize the reality of what they are doing, and then meet them where they are at, and work with them to want to cooperate with you in those ways. At the same time, teaching them what you want them to do. So this is another aspect of it as well. They're learning through repetition and consistency. And just because you've said something 1 time, 10 times, 20 times, 100 times, if there's one reality you need to accept about raising babies and toddlers and just kids in general, is that you are going to repeat stuff a lot, because that's how the brain learns. I couldn't give you a guitar, tell you once or twice or even 10 times how to play it, and then all of a sudden you're fluently playing it. And the brain is so complex in its logic and reasoning skills. So they've got so much to learn. If you think about a child coming into the world with no judgment, no knowledge, no nothing, all they've got is sight, sound, seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, smelling, and they're immersed in everything. And they're learning, what is that color? What is that thing? What does that thing do? How does that thing do that? Why is she looking like that? Why is she sounding like that? Who is that person? What do they mean to me? How can I have fun? How can I avoid pain? Look around your room for a minute and look at all of the things around you that you don't have to label or understand or process. You don't have to prioritize anymore. It's just a given that you do what you do. And then start to look from the eyes of a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old or a 1-year-old or a 4-year-old, and start to look at what life must be like for them. That they may get a bit of information from you and it may stick for a little bit, but then there's billions of other bits of information that clouds their attention span from the 5 minutes ago when you just told them not to do something. That they can literally stand there, look you in the eye and say, sorry, I won't do that again, or I understand, or, yep, no, that's naughty. And then 5 minutes later, they're jumping on the cat's tail when you just specifically said don't do it. Because in that 5 minutes, so much else happened and they, lost that priority because something else was more fun. And, it's really interesting when you see life through the eyes of a toddler. And you even feel a little bit of empathy towards what they're going through, because their mindset is dealing with so much information that they're needing to process. So it must be really challenging for them. And now you kind of get some sort of sense too as to why they get so attached to wearing that same piece of clothing over and over again, or needing the same breakfast and having a meltdown when something that is known to them doesn't go to plan. Because these knowns are important to them in a crazy world of confusion where there's things that I don't know about left, right, and center. So when I know something predictable, then they attach themselves to it. So have some kind of empathy of what's going on for your toddler during these years of needing repetition and consistency to understand life and learn about life, and accept the reality that we're going to have to repeat stuff a lot in order for them to get those messages reinforced. And this is where you can use cause and effect. Now, I want to talk about discipline for a minute, because when we're talking about disciplining our toddlers, often we're not in alignment with reality of where they're at in their brain development in order to be implementing the right kind of discipline. Now, the word discipline comes from the Latin word, I don't know the pronunciation, but it's like disciplinare or something like that. And it actually means to teach. It's not actually about punishment, but that's often the association we put on discipline, is I want to punish them for something that they've done wrong. Now, when you're talking about a toddler and you say they've done the wrong thing, they've misbehaved, and I'm going to discipline them, I'm going to make something painful for them by putting them in timeout or taking them away so I can teach them what they did wrong. Now, I get that concept. However, when you look at the reality of where they're at in their brain development, what you're essentially saying is that I'm going to punish you because I think you should have made a different decision. But in order for them to have made a different decision, they would have needed to, in that moment, think about what they were doing, think about the potential outcome. So they would have needed to think about the future, the potential outcome of the consequences of doing this. And then if that consequence was not ideal, then they would have needed to have drawn upon an alternative solution to dealing with that moment in front of them, so that they could produce a different outcome that was more favorable and more considerate of other people around them. Now, that requires an enormous amount of logic and reasoning skills that a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old just doesn't have. And so when we're saying I'm going to punish you for something that you've done, yes, it's a way of teaching them what to do and what not to do. But I would be at this age more leaning towards, so I'm not saying don't do it, but I would be more leaning towards teaching them what to do. You want them to practice how good it feels to do the right thing, to be considerate. You want to teach them those values of consideration. What is consideration? What is respect? Because one of the things you'll often hear me say to parents is don't personalize your toddler's behavior because they don't even know you have feelings. Because they're not thinking like that. They're not thinking like you and I. And just like you can make a request that they understand in that moment, and then 5 minutes later they've just completely ignored that request. The same thing can happen with emotions. They can, in a moment, say to you, I'm sorry, I hurt you, or I made you angry, or I did something naughty, or something like that, that tells you that they are aware of the consequences of their actions, which they are in that moment, but that doesn't mean they have the skills to be able to assess cause and effect in that moment that they've made that decision. It's part of their learning process that they're like, our toddlers are like little scientists. And what do scientists do? They test their hypotheses about life. So they're constantly doing things to cause an effect, to see what effect it causes. And so they can learn from doing that. So you want to teach them, this is where discipline does come in terms of putting them in timeout and stuff like that. It can be help them to teach them what not to do, but I would be more leaning towards teaching them what to do, how to be gentle, what consideration is, what respect is, how do they speak to you, how do they handle their emotions, how do they change their picture when life hasn't gone to plan. Message around that. Like I remember when my son was 4, he was a big tantrum thrower. He was my strong-willed child. And I remember when he was 4, he cracked it because there was no, cereal that he liked in the cupboard. And he threw himself on the floor, and I remember saying to him, Rai, reality is there's no cereal and I can't just grab it from nowhere. So sooner or later, you're going to have to decide what else you want for breakfast. So when you're ready to do that, you let me know. And I stepped over him and walked away. And in 5 minutes, he came up to me and he said, okay, I'll have oats. Sometimes we have to allow our children to have their emotions. But what we often do, getting back into the story of how your thoughts cause you to feel resistance to what's going on, is because in your story, when you see your child having a tantrum or whinging or getting upset by something, we jump into fix-it mode as parents, thinking that we should be able to control our child's behavior and we should know what to do to stop this behavior in this moment. And we get all worked up when we can't control. But sometimes we didn't need to control. We just needed to allow them to learn how to regulate their emotions, which is exactly where they're at when they're toddlers. So maybe we need to let go of always needing to fix or control our child's behavior and allow it to be what it is. Give them the messaging, give them the support, give them the love. I'm here for you whenever you're ready. You know, you can get cranky at this all you like, but the reality is you're not having that toy, or the reality is you have to get up, or you have to go to sleep, or whatever it is. You can be really kind and empathetic about the fact that they don't want to do it, but the reality is we often have to do things that we don't want to do, and part of them realizing that is the pain that they're going to go through in learning how to accept that reality. So we can use empathy, we can use love. I know you're really disappointed by that. Come here and I'll give you a hug. You're still not getting it, but the reality is you behave that way. I'm taking this toy. You can't play with that toy anymore because you're not able to show me that you're playing with it gently, and I've been showing you how to play with it gently, but you're continuing to use it in a rough way, so I have to take it away from you. I'm sorry, I know that's really disappointing, but I need to teach you how to respect your toys. So you can even use cause and effect in that way, but it's not discipline in the way of saying you should have made a better decision. I've told you 20,000 times not to do that and you've chosen to do it again, so now I'm going to punish you. You want to come across, if you're going to take something away or use discipline in form of pain, you want to do it in a teaching style, in a way that teaches them, because what happens is when a child is angry or they're hurt or upset, the learning part of the brain shuts down anyway. So you're not actually teaching them anything, or it's falling on deaf ears because the emotional side of the brain has kicked in. So you want to try to be as calm and as educational as possible when you're dealing with your child's behavior. And try to preempt what you'll need to teach them in terms of, dealing with certain situations, how to be gentle, what's required, the standard, what we need to do. Encourage them, make it fun, make it interesting, make learning, the engaging process that it needs to be, because that kind of caters to where they're at. So again, it's meeting them where they're at.